Welcome to the Investment Banking Leaders Podcast, brought to you by the Investment Banking Leaders Club, your exclusive access to the industry's most successful leaders. These experts have closed thousands of deals, generating hundreds of billions of dollars, and they're here to share their strategies, insights, and leadership lessons that can fast-track your career. But the learning doesn't stop here. Join the Investment Banking Leaders Club at ibleadersclub.com for even more exclusive insights, leadership frameworks, and career-accelerating resources and events. Thanks for joining us, and best of luck on your growth journey. So we have another impressive discussion and guest for you today, and the podcast has actually broken new ground. We've got our first leader from France with us today. So we've now brought leadership insights from 7 different countries, which is really exciting. Now, today's guest made a bold leap from a really promising career in investment banking to launching a fast-growing training company that's dedicated to helping the next generation break into the world of finance. Chiara Operto started her career at Credit Suisse in M&A before pivoting into entrepreneurship and eventually founding Edge. And Edge is a company that's become a go-to platform for aspiring bankers across Europe. Through coaching, content, cutting-edge AI integration, she's rethinking how talent is discovered and also developed. So in this episode, we're going to explore her unique leadership style, the surprising value of sales skills in banking, what banks can learn from startups, and why the most successful people are as good at managing themselves as they are at managing their deals. So super excited to have you with us today, Chiara. Welcome to the Investment Banking Leaders Podcast, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks a lot again for the invitation, Peter.
Awesome. So why don't we jump straight in? What drew you into investment banking, and what were some of your defining moments from your time at Credit Suisse?
Yeah, so basically when I started university, I remember telling my family, I won't do finance, I don't want to. And yet, only a few months later, I would say, after a trip to London where I attended an event organized by SEO London and speaking with alumni, I was fascinated about the industry. I think because it was the only one where I've met ambitious people. Yeah, I would say ambitious people first. And so that experience motivated me to start applying for a spring internship. At the time in France, no one really knew about this type of programs. So after that, I've managed to get and secure offers from Credit Suisse, HSBC, and JP Morgan. And of course, my favorite one was at Credit Suisse that I've converted into a summer internship and then into a full-time. And I think what I really liked the most, it was not only because I was covering a sector that I really understood and that I was passionate about, that was the consumer retail sector. For example, I had the opportunity to work on the self-register transaction, but also I think because all the people I've worked with were experts, passionate people, and they were super ambitious. I would say there were 3 defining moments during my time at Credit Suisse. Of course, converting my summer internship into a full-time. So yeah, of course, during my summer, these months were so intense, but I loved working on that live deal of self-regis. It was also when I began working closely with my managing director, who became my mentor. I would say the second one was my first day as an analyst. I meet fantastic colleagues that became today my closest friends, and they're still today. And finally, I would say the day I've decided to leave. This moment became a major turning point in my life because I've created my own company. So yeah, I would say these are the 3 moments.
Well, thanks for sharing. I love the journey from not wanting to be in finance to being fully in finance in M&A and working on successful consumer deals. And I find it really interesting that it was the ambition and the inspiration of the team that really sold you. And I think sometimes it's really forgotten just how much of a people business and a team effort investment banking is, right? So that's great. What would you say made your experience different from the average junior banker?
Yeah. So of course, I think what makes it different is the fact that as soon as I've arrived in the team, I managed to build trust directly with the seniors, but also with the juniors. I think when you're entering a team, this is the most important thing. And it's at that moment when I had established trust with my team, that I started having loads of responsibilities, working on high-level tasks such as modeling, and also, of course, being, I would say, the person that was chosen to work on the deals I wanted, so especially the HPC and luxury sectors. And I think also maybe what makes that different, of course, is the people I was working with. As I said, they had a strong mindset, And there was such an unspoken mutual respect within the team. I would say everyone was staying on the long term. I've built my closest friendships there. And I think this is super important, and it can be inspiring also for the new juniors that are coming in the industry. But when you're choosing a company you would like to join in long term, you need to choose the team, because you're going like to stay for so many nights, so many weekends in investment banking, especially M&A. And so I think that sense of camaraderie, in my opinion, was crucial in selecting the best group for my full-time position. And of course, I would say the combination of abilities I've learned as a junior, not only on the analytical and technical part, but also understanding how a business works and like applying the analytical into the strategy. And this really helped me like for my next step.
Did that come naturally, or were you really seeking out to understand the why, not just the analytics, but the strategy part? Was that you seeking out the why, or how did that work?
Yeah, I think that it's because I was so passionate about the sector. When you're working on a sector that passionates you, you quickly understand. Like when I was working, for instance, on Chanel, I knew how it works. I knew the company. So I think it's psychological, but you're more keen to understand a deep dive and show you that you're doing well and a bit thinking out of the box. As I was always visualizing my career on the long term, I was every time like thinking at the next step, and I wanted to be included in the management meetings and stuff. And for me, it was important while doing something, but also to understand the analytical part, how it works in the real life. And I think this has always made the difference. Maybe it's me, I'm like this, but I think this is an advice also I can share because it's really important. Yeah.
No, I think your passion definitely comes through. And I've heard from other leaders, like pick the sector, pick the focus where you have an interest or where you feel connected to it, right? Because then you're obviously going to do the things you mentioned and you're going to want to develop yourself more and more. So I love that. Just on the trust, I find the trust fascinating as well. Any key tips for building trust that you can share with the group?
Yeah. So I would say this is something you need to build all along as a junior, but also as a senior. I think as a junior, you need to build trust with your team. And as a senior, you need to build trust with your customers, but also with your team that you're managing, right? Mm-hmm. As a junior, I would say when you're entering investment banking, you're going to do so many mistakes. Can't remember everything that I did, but I remember some. And I think as long as you're entering investment banking or in a team, you always need to ask for feedback at the beginning, try to be proactive, try to ask some questions, show that you're interested. And also when you get like some comments or when you're doing a mistakes, try to not reproduce it right after. I think this proactivity and the questions you will ask will show like that we can trust you. And I would say that the biggest win a junior can have, is when a senior send him, can you please do this by Monday? And you just need to reply, yes, of course, will do. And you don't receive any more emails of like follow-ups of stuff because he trusts you. And this is how you'll get the biggest responsibilities. And I think this is also why you're going to stay on a long term in the industry.
Love that. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Ask for the feedback, show your interest, be curious. I've heard that a lot on the podcast in the past. Obviously, don't repeat those mistakes. And I say a lot to my team, do what you say you're going to do. So it really resonates with what you said there at the end. If you say you're going to deliver by a certain part, then do it. Obviously, I love what you're doing with Edge and you're rethinking, as I said, how talent is discovered and more importantly, developed. And I know you're an expert in the space. So in terms of aspiring bankers and what they need to know, you've obviously worked with hundreds of aspiring bankers. So what's the most common mistake from those trying to break into the industry?
Yeah, like you mean the more in terms of maybe the mistakes I can see through like juniors that want to break into the industry, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I think the most common mistake is like focus on memorizing the concepts by heart instead of truly understanding their application in real life transactions. Like for instance, knowing how to define a DCF is one thing, but knowing why and when to use it and why its limitations are in a live deal, it's what makes the difference in interviews and the job, right? It was a bit what I was telling before, also on how to build trust, but also how to be good at what you're doing. I think also another mistake in entering this industry is that like too many candidates are apply purely because I've heard that, of course, of high salaries and prestige. So that's a fact and that's okay with it. But without appreciating, I would say, the long-term commitment required. This year, Goldman Sachs has received more than 300,000 applications for internships and graduates. So standing out today requires not just technical preparation, but also the maturity to show that you can sustain yourself on the long term. And there's something I would maybe had. I remember my managing the director that told me, Chiara, M&A is a marathon. It's a long tunnel you'll have to go through. So you need to keep your eyes on the long-term objectives. And so I would say that advice also shaped the way I approach my career. And too many students or graduates or juniors are only focusing on the first year, like getting the offer. So surviving the hours without sometimes realizing that success in investment banking comes from building resilience, but also pacing yourself and keeping perspective on the long term. So I think these are the common mistakes I'm seeing.
That's great. Yeah, I guess you got to really show that you understand the concept versus just regurgitating facts or documents. So that makes a lot of sense. And I like the long-term view. I've heard a lot that investment banking is a marathon, not a sprint, but the tunnel, I think, brings it to life a bit more, and really having that light at the end of it that you're focusing on. And you mentioned that worked for you really well in your role. Let's talk a little bit about sales skills. You really emphasize the importance of being commercial and having these sales skills. And you shared with me that it's something that few bankers really think about early on. Maybe, again, it's back to just getting through that first year. But why do you believe these skills are crucial, even in technical roles?
Yeah. So basically, at the end of your career or at some step, I would say from like VP, at the end of the day, even the most technical role in banking is still about people and transactions, right? You can build the best model in the world, but if you don't know how to negotiate, to position it in front of a customer, but also to defend your analysis, it won't translate into a signed deal, right? Sometimes in investment banking, specifically for like small cap companies, like sometimes the customer, you need to negotiate with him, convince him, because they're selling their first baby, I would say, their first company. So they're really involved into it. And so for me, sales and commercial skills allow you to build trust, make the client, I would say, feel understood, and get them to stay by your side on the long term. Yeah, these are the skills that I think differentiate someone who simply executes tasks from someone who actively drive and create, of course, repeat business.
I really connect with that, and it makes a ton of sense. And particularly, I talk a lot through the Investment Banking Leaders Club about that tough transition from VP into MD when you start to originate, and you need to bring a lot of the things you've just mentioned together. Any advice on how to build those sales skills? Because obviously it is very demanding, the role, as you say, you're very busy. So any tips or tricks on how to build that commercial mindset and sales skills along the way?
Yeah, sure. I think like when you are in investment banking, the pain point I would see is that you don't have time to do anything else, to develop other type of soft skills. When I was in investment banking, like before starting, I was creating a first company. When I entered investment banking, I couldn't spend any time on that. I felt I was not creative, that I had no more ideas and stuff. And so I would say try as a junior, as soon as you can, go into meetings, like try to see and listen. I think listening is the most important skill when you want to develop also sales skills, because sales skills is not like sell like without being natural. For me, it's just managing to create a relationship with the person you have in front of you, and so that you build trust, and this goes through listening. So try to listen, try to understand what the customer wants. I think like when you'll be able also to show that you're listening and you understand, it's going to be a first step. And then, of course, it's by training. So during your first pitch, of course, it's all about training. You'll go through mistakes. But yeah, these are, I would say, the main first steps you need to go through to manage how to sell.
Makes a lot of sense. And I think also there's such a good opportunity, actually, when you are trusted, like you said before, to be in the room. And when you're in those pitches, listening, right, to some of the seniors that do it well and trying to soak that up like a sponge, I can imagine is really important too. Just to go back for preparing for interviews, you obviously mentioned that you got to show more than being just technically strong and understanding the concepts. You mentioned 300,000 applications in GS, which is insane. Yeah. So what advice do you have on how to stand out when you're preparing for those interviews?
Yeah, so maybe I'm going to repeat myself, but show the maturity, of course, that you can sustain yourself over the long run. Be super strong in terms of fit. Like people will spend so much time like with you during the week and sometimes also during the weekends or during the holidays. So a recruiter told me last time, at the end of the interview, I'm asking myself, if I want to have a coffee or a beer after work with the candidate. And this is exactly what you need to show, like yourself, right? Sometimes people think that in M&A or investment banking more generally, that they all have an old school mindset, if I would say, or too strict. But in the end, they're normal people and you need to show your true self, of course, professionally. And of course, your sales side, show that you understand the skills required not only as a junior, but also as a senior too. Because also today, recruiters want to keep their candidates as long as possible.
Love that. Thanks. I want to move into a bit about leadership. Obviously, this is a leadership podcast. You're an entrepreneur leading a business. So I've got to get some insight for our listeners there. So I guess you've gone from being part of a really structured, hierarchical banking team setup to then leading your own company. So how's your leadership style evolved?
Yeah, I think leadership has taken different forms throughout my life. First, like growing up, I had to take responsibility for my sister super early, which gave me a sense, I think, of accountability. Then I've competed into horse riding. It taught me discipline and quick decision making under pressure, I would say. And in investment banking, as I was saying, even within a hierarchy, I learned that leadership is about building trust with your team and being reliable. Now, as a founder, it's completely different. It's about carrying the vision, inspiring others, of course, because they need to follow you, and transferring the trust I have in the project. So my team stays motivated and aligned. So my style has evolved from, of course, being a reliable executor, becoming someone who sets the direction and empowers like others to follow it. But I would say I've every time built everything around trust.
It's a central theme. It keeps coming back. So I'm definitely connecting with that. And I love how you growing up, how that's helped shape your leadership, as you mentioned, from the accountability with your sisters to the horse riding. I find that there's some form of sport that helps with grit, right? Especially in these team types of environments. So really interesting. I'm responsible for setting the vision at Outram and moving that forward. So I guess a little bit selfishly, any tips for me on how you go about inspiring the Edge team with your vision?
Yeah, I think that in a one word, I would say, and I was telling you that last time, but it's win-win, right? Whether it's partnerships, bonuses, or recognition, I always try to create situations where people feel rewarded for the value they bring, right? So I make sure to show appreciation and connect every person's work to the company's bigger impact. When people see the outcome of their efforts, I think they feel part of something larger than themselves. And I think this is what people are seeking for today. And I also push for like kind of ownership and continuous learning. Like great founders, I would say, often say people stay when they feel they're growing, when they feel trusted, and I would say treated like owners and not just executors. So if every team member learns something new every day and knows their contribution is truly meaningful, then I think motivation follows naturally.
I can see how that's so powerful, right? Connecting to that purpose, that mission, connecting the work back, you said, which I can assure is really impactful. So yeah, thanks for that. I'll take those tips on board for myself as well. I know one of the biggest threats in banking, and to be honest, one of the biggest threats in entrepreneurship, right, is burnout. And I'd love to know a bit more about how do you personally manage your resilience and time? And then I guess, how do you help others do the same?
Yeah. So for me, maybe not everyone will agree with that, but for me, it's all about discipline because when you start creating a company, when you enter investment banking, you know that the hours will be intense, the pressure will be constant, that you will face some drawbacks, some failures and stuff. So for me, discipline and resilience comes from building routines that give me, like, of course, on my side, balance outside of work. It can be sports, sleep, or simply taking moments to disconnect. And as I was saying, I see it like training myself as a marathon and not as a sprint. So when I worked with like young bankers or students, I remind that resilience is the most important thing. Like it's not about burning out, working until you collapse. It's all about building habits that will manage you to stay on the long term, to keep yourself in a good, I would say, health and shape, and staying performance. Because as long as you're just burning out or you're not just disciplined, your performance will like decrease. And so for me, discipline is how you manage your energy, your priorities, and even your mindset, right? That makes the difference between burning out and building, I would say, a sustainable career.
Great feedback. And I was reading only yesterday about how tech's changing and it's becoming the investment banking in terms of hours now. So it's really interesting to see that. I'm a big believer of the morning routine. For me, that's been really what's sustained me, like getting up, having a workout, having some affirmations, maybe a little bit of meditation that sets me up for the day, and just having that as a routine. I find that super helpful. As a female founder operating in a traditionally male-dominated industries, both finance and tech, what's been your experience and what advice do you have for women considering entrepreneurship?
Yeah, honestly, I've never framed my journey in terms of men versus women. For me, there are strong, I would say, synergies and complementarities, and I think what creates value. Like, my main advice would be like, don't hesitate to create and take risks, especially when you're young. When I left banking, one of my MD, so managing director, told me I would have loved to start my own company, but now I can't. I have a family alone and a lifestyle I can't give up. And that conversation really stuck me. Like, he told me I would have loved, like, what you're realizing now, like leaving investment banking to create your company, has been my dream. And so it reminded me that the best moment to try is before those constraints come. So don't see being a woman, I would say, as a weakness. I think there are always complementarities. See it as an opportunity to bring a different perspective, both in investment banking, but also in entrepreneurship. And yeah, I think the biggest differentiator is having an idea, yes, but it's starting, like acting, and I would say courage to start, to take risks and keep going, even if it's uncomfortable. So yeah, beyond our individual journeys, I think every woman should dare to step into entrepreneurship, and that it's, I would say, the opening door a little wider for also the next generations. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. Thanks for the feedback. And hopefully that inspires some other female listeners to take on the journey. I think it's fascinating that starting before you have the constraints, maybe a bit younger in your career journey, taking the risk, right? Because maybe you don't have the amount of experience that you have later, but then as you say, you're stuck by the constraints. So yeah, really connect with that. And how important is it having co-founders, in your opinion, to help on the journey? Can be lonely, I imagine, otherwise.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think finding the right co-founder is the most important thing when you're creating a business. And indeed, my co-founder is a man. That makes me follow up on the fact that for me, leadership and leadership is not about gender, it's only about vision and execution. When it's so important, because when you have some co-founders, you find some people that with whom you have synergies and complementarities. It's also your best friends. And for me, co-founding a company with someone, it's even more important, or I would say like the biggest responsibility, even more when you are engaging with someone. So for me, like, they're here when, I don't know, you feel bad, when there is a failure. So yeah, finding the best co-founder, one in having a vision, one is more in the execution. For instance, my co-founder is the best salesperson I know, and I'm more like on the side of marketing and building trust with the companies. So we have this complementarity that makes the execution even smoother and better. Yeah.
Makes sense. That backup, and more importantly, that the strengths, having your strengths balanced, as you say, to grow the business in the right way. So thanks for sharing that. As a tech business, alongside the recruiting, it'd be remiss of me not to talk a bit about AI and recruiting and the trends and the future. So why don't we spend a bit of time there? I know from talking to you, you're building some exciting AI features at Edge. Things like interview simulations and personalized training. What's worked well and what's still tricky, in your opinion, when it comes to using AI in recruiting particularly?
Yeah, so basically AI for me has made, I would say, preparation more accessible and personalized. So at Edge, we have an interview simulator that lets candidates practice technical and fit questions in real conditions with instant feedback or on content and delivery. So it's quite a game changer, I would say, for students who don't always have mentors or alumni support. Of course, we're also using AI to adapt training plans. We're building AI agent based on our database to coach every student depending on their level, on their progress and stuff. So just rather than giving everyone the same material. So I would say on that part, it's quite interesting for students, and also banks are starting using AI at scale. For instance, Goldman Sachs for recruitments, but also other banks have been using high reviews, not only to check answers, but also to assess tone, confidence, communication skills. That's why we train students on both technical and soft skills, because the algorithm now are able to evaluate. However, the challenge is that AI can sometimes, I think, oversimplify human potential and even reinforce bias. Perfect answer that shows creativity or resilience might be undervalued by a machine. That's why for me, AI, well, in terms of recruitment process, I would say, should and will, for me, in my opinion, remain a tool, not a replacement. It can scale access and efficiency, but real recruiting requires like human judgment, empathy, and and context of.
So it's really narrowing that wide funnel. So if you're a Goldman Sachs, for example, with 300,000, it's bringing it down into the funnel so that the human can do the work more effective. Okay, it makes sense to me. And do you see it changing in training the talent over the next few years in any way? I know you said the simulations, and I 100% understand that, but do you see anything else coming through AI in that area?
I think like in terms of early stage and recruitment, we'll still have the AI to screen CVs, running video interviews, identify skill gaps for sure. We'll still keep, of course, the human judgment because we want to recruit a person with whom we want to work, right? So for me, this future is AI for scale, humans for nuances. But I would say more maybe within the job in investment banking. Like today, there are many banks that are starting having their own LLM that's just installed Claude, sorry. So my advice is I would see AI as a tool to be more efficient and start made time consuming tasks more efficient. But we're still going to keep a human in the negotiation phase, I would say, of a deal or of an interview.
Perfect. Very, really clear. And it interests me, and I guess it brings another question to mind. For those junior bankers, how do they stay relevant and thrive in a world where AI will inevitably handle more of the technical grunt work, if you will?
Yeah. So maybe, as I said before, build your storytelling, show maturity for the job. And most importantly, I think, and this is a big drawback within the young community, I would say it's learn how to use the AI instead of fearing it. AI, as I said, is not a competitor. It will never replace the human judgment that is needed when you're indeed negotiating billion-dollar contracts, right? But it will take over the time-consuming tasks, as I said. So my advice is master AI tools to become faster and more efficient than your peers. Develop your own thinking so that you can challenge AI outputs rather than copy them blindly. And this is a bigger risk today. And of course, invest in soft skills. So negotiation, communication, relationship building, because trust with clients and teams is something no algorithm can replicate.
That's three really strong pieces of advice there, right? Understand how to use the AI correctly, make sure you understand that you're technically strong so you can challenge it, as you say, and then again, the sales skills, the strategic skills, a lot of the things we've already talked about makes a ton of sense. So thanks for sharing. I'm interested in business development. As an entrepreneur, building a business, you can't do it without really solid business development. What fascinates me about the model you have is that it's a reoccurring market. The new students are coming in every year. But what have you learned about business development and I guess staying top of mind?
Yeah, what's Indy, what you say is that what's unique in education is that every year there's a new generation arriving with the same challenges, but different mindset. So that means for me that business development isn't just about acquiring customers once. It's about constantly rebuilding trust with a fresh audience. Basically, at the beginning when I started, I was telling myself, I'm not a great business developer. I'm not a great sales. I don't know how to sell. I was a bit shy on selling a service because if I was a student and I received someone calling me, wanting me to sell something, I would have been like, no, thank you. But it's again about trust and the fact that you're always trying to adapt to the audience. I think what makes me successful in this kind of sector is that I've been the first person trying to demystify a sector that was a bit taboo. And so through trust, of course, people were managing to identify to myself. So I'd say the things that I've learned and how to stay top of mind is consistency that matters more than one-off wins, because you always need to adapt to your audience. You have to show up again and again where students are. So whether that's LinkedIn or other social networks or schools, I would say community outlasts campaign. The importance of community and building relationship with the community, because students don't want just resources. They want to feel part of something bigger. So what I did is by building WhatsApp groups, mentorship programs, we stay present in their daily lives and not just during their recruitment season. And this is also how you manage to sell on the long term. And of course, last but not least, in terms of business development, is partnerships, because they extend their reach. So working with universities, training providers, or even bank themselves help us be recommended at the right time. So when students are actively preparing. Yeah, I would say staying top of mind is about being predictable in value, but adaptable in format. So everywhere the channels and expectation shift slightly, but the need for clarity, guidance, and trust never changes.
I love that. Really, really interesting, right? Demystify the area. That's the first thing. Be relatable, as you mentioned, and that builds that trust, and then really be consistent. I'm really interested in community. The Investment Banking Leaders Club, we've started a lot with content, but we're really now ramping up community. So it's so interesting to hear the WhatsApp group, staying top of mind, connecting people through mentorship program, and how valuable that's been. So definitely a lot I can take away from that as well. When it comes to investment bankers who may often wait for inbound deal flow, what do you think they should take away from this in how you approach PR and outreach and building visibility?
Yeah, indeed. My mindset has always been like, don't wait, but create. The only thing is that I think in big companies such as Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, I would say the deal flow is quite easy. But so I would maybe talk about more or address this advice to smaller boutiques or smaller companies that are starting to be created. I think if you want to stand out, you need to build visibility and put yourself out there. Like, again, trust. Like, I don't want to get advised by someone who I don't know, who I'm not sure haven't the expertise. So for me, this means like owning your narrative. So what I'm encouraging people also to do, and there are still some founders of boutiques that are starting like communicating on LinkedIn, show what they've achieved, what sector they know best. If clients don't see your expertise, they won't call you first. I think that also proactive outreach. So at Edge, we don't wait for schools or students to come to us. Of course, now we have a lead generator that is quite massive. But before that, I've managed to build a community and build trust. So we reach out, we partner, we show value first. And I think bankers can apply the same goal. So go beyond waiting for pitches, actively nurture relationship with CEOs, CFOs, even funds. They can also participate to some events. I know this is not something super common, but try to identify some interesting events where they can go to meet some people. And of course, again, but I think it's my philosophy, consistency builds trust. So visibility is not, of course, about a flashy post or one client dinner. It's about, I think, present over time. So sharing insights, showing that you understand the market trends, being the person people think when a deal comes up. And so in short, I think that bankers can learn that same principles of PR and outreach applying to deal making. So be proactive, build trust at scale, and of course, make the market see you before they need you.
Love that. The proactivity comes through, the partnership, reaching out, adding value first. That really connects with me. I think that's so key. If you want to build a meaningful relationship, it's actually going to last and lead to partnership. Is there anything from building community, now you've built one and you've been through that process, are there any like key learnings that if you went back and built the community again, you'd do differently?
To be honest, I don't think I would change something in terms of building a community, because like every time I've tried always to listen. Like building a community is also helping you to understand the pain. I think this is super important. So gathering and makes people feel that they are part of a journey with you. So I think this I've managed to do it well at the beginning. Maybe the thing I would have that I should have been doing better is like getting all the data properly stored in something. This is something I didn't do it. But in terms of building the community, yes, it's quite easy. Build a WhatsApp group, not with, I would say, CFOs and CEOs, but try to build a community, some dinners. I know in France, there are some bankers, especially women bankers, that are organizing once a month a breakfast with all the women bankers. And this is quite like a club deal, or as you organized a community where people can meet, they can share insights. And keep consistency, of course. It's not just one shot and it's fine. Not just creating a WhatsApp group and then it's fine. Wait that people talk. Make them interact. And I would say wake their proactivity and their consistency in terms of sharing things through the community.
Yeah, that resilience comes back and always showing up. You've mentioned that a few times, and I think it's so important. We're more connected via our phones and computers than we've ever been. The lack of community for me is so obvious and apparent. So the more we can fill gaps, and you're obviously doing a great job there. So I only hope the IB Leaders Club can follow and do something just as impressive. If you could, we're going to move towards the wrap, believe it or not. Time's flown by. So just a few quick questions to finish, really. If you could go back to your younger self, Chiara, starting out in Credit Suisse, knowing what you know now, what's the one piece of advice you'd give?
Yeah, so I think I'll tell myself, like, learn faster. That performance isn't just about how many hours you work, but about how you manage your energy and your relationships. I think this is something I'm keeping today with me, because when you don't have a lot of time, you need to keep your energy and stop like giving it to everyone or to every single task. So when I started, indeed, I thought that the only way to prove myself was to grind endlessly and execute perfectly. That helps, of course, in the short term, right? But the real differentiator is learning to communicate clearly, build trust with seniors, and stay curious about the bigger picture behind the deal, of course, and behind everything you're doing. Of course, the hours, as I said, I'm saying to all the juniors, will be long. But if you manage your mindset and relationships well, you can turn the pressure into growth instead of burnout, and see each failure as a way to grow up and not as a way to step back.
Great advice. That hours not as a badge of honor, right? But mindset and the long-term vision as well. Love that. Our thousands of regular listeners know that I always ask guests this. I believe that leaders are readers, not necessarily just books these days, right? We've got podcasts and tons of other materials, but what materials have had a really big impact on your career that you'd recommend to our listeners?
Yeah. Maybe I'm not a big reader, to be honest. Like, I'm trying to find some time, but I can't manage to work out until midnight. You don't want to read at midnight, right? But maybe, and this can be a book that will like make echo to entrepreneurs, to like senior bankers, but also like to juniors, right? For me, there was one book that really marked me, is the Almanac of Naval Ravikant. So this book is talking about Naval Ravikant is one of the biggest business angel in the world. And during his book, he's explaining that it's not just about business, it's about mindset, leverage, and building a life on what creates long-term value. And I go back to it often when I need perspective, because on the entrepreneurial side, I also like context that mixes like strategy, but also like mindset and what you want to do after, right? What makes you feel in peace? What makes you feel happy? And so this book really helped me to balance between create value on the long term, but do not forget your long-term objectives and what makes you feel happy. Just answering why are you doing all this? And maybe more, yes, on the entrepreneurial part, I'm listening a lot to not maybe podcasts, but more YouTube channels. There are lots of French entrepreneurs that are quite inspiring, sometimes going on YouTube. And I think what I'm also trying to do, read a lot the news, but also LinkedIn, because I try to stay very close to finance and tech, because these kind of industries are evolving a lot. So yeah, most of it I'm trying to read the news, like Financial Times, like LinkedIn a lot, and connecting a lot with new founders. This is my way to keep on track on the news and how I can learn.
Back to that relationship and partnership building. And the book you mentioned, it makes sense, right? That holistic approach to business, the purpose, the why, as well as the execution, as you say. Great. Last question before I let you get back to it. I know you're busy, so thanks for all the time. What's next for you and Edge? Any exciting projects or trends you're super fired up about?
So we've managed to coach more than 1,000 students. So this year is going to be to meet finally the revenue goal of 2 million euros revenue. So this is the first goal, of course, make Edge as the biggest edtech for students that want to break into a job and give access to the information to people or students that couldn't have or can't have access to it. So try to input AI in terms of automatization to manage to build all the coaching cycle of the student. And of course, continue internationalizing through partnerships. that what we're doing, trying to expand to US and also all along Europe.
Amazing. A lot of growth ahead, ambition, as you mentioned, and congrats on the milestones. 1,000 students, 2 million in revenue, they're big milestones. So keep up the great work, and I wish you and all the team the best of luck for the next few months. Thanks so much for joining today, Chiara. Great insight. Really enjoyed chatting to you. I know the audience will take a lot away from it.
Yeah, thank you very much.
This episode of the podcast was brought to you by the Investment Banking Leaders Club. And to keep leveling up your career, join the club at ibleadersclub.com. for exclusive insights, leadership strategies, and career growth resources straight from the industry's top professionals. I want to say thanks to our key partner, Outram, the global leader in financial deal gifts, awards, and recognition, for their ongoing support of our mission to empower both aspiring and senior investment banking leaders. I really hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thanks for tuning in. And until next time, best of luck on your growth journey.